What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Grinderslive, NBA edition. Yes, NBA is still going on, and it's very confusing. Lots of stuff going on. Got a full 5-game slate today that we have no idea what's going to happen after the first 2 games. And by that, I mean we have no idea what the teams are going to do. Lots of stuff to go through today. Everything's going to be up in the air. Make sure that if you're playing today, be ready to late swap at any given point because we don't know what's going to happen with a lot of these players towards the end of the day here. So in any case, going to be fun, going to be interesting. Everything could change in the next 30 minutes depending on if we get any news on anything. But we're going to try and go through the best I can. I am joined here by my good buddy here, Squirrel Patrol. How you doing there?
Good. Yeah, it's a crazy slate. This is my first day back from kind of a weird vacation, and this is the slate I get.
It's Corona. Every vacation's a weird vacation.
Right, that's true. But yeah, I mean, we've got veteran players dropping like flies out here. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting day. And I think what you said is key. It's going to be a late swap day. So pay attention to the starting lineups.
Yeah, not to be Dean, but yeah, we've already got like half of the OKC team just ruled out. Half of Dallas, or 80% of Dallas, ruled out. We got Milwaukee not playing for anything. The Lakers potentially with a lot of guys out. Miami, who knows what they're going to do. Everything is just entirely up in the air, and we could get random news that wasn't even on our radar that comes out and then is immediately reversed like it was, I believe, yesterday with OKC. And everything's just weird. Everything's weird right now. It's NBA at the weirdest time, at the weirdest place, all in Orlando. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. What are your just overview thoughts on the slate? Like, my thought is like you're probably playing the chalk. Like the chalk is there for a reason. You can always swap around later on the day depending on how the chalk hit or didn't hit. But like a lot of the chalk is happening in these first 2 games, so it's going to be a probable like late swap day where you're just editing all your lineups at the end of the day here. But what's your just initial overview?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sentence, we have no idea what's going to happen. Because I think, we obviously have a lot of news in the first couple of games of the day, but then those later games, there are some games and some teams where they don't really have a lot to play for. So we're kind of presuming like Giannis is going to be in. We're kind of presuming LeBron, Anthony Davis are going to be in. We don't really know, and this could have the rug kind of pulled out from under us at any point. So yeah, it could be crazy.
Yeah. So let's just dive right in here. Start off with OKC versus Phoenix. Phoenix is, I think, a 7.5-point favorite, 220 total here. So some Phoenix guys are going to be chalk. Like Phoenix is 1 game out of the playoffs or out of the play-in game right now, I believe. Like they still got a decent shot at it. They've been playing some good basketball, and their guys little bit probably underpriced for how they've been playing. And if you're paying up for some people, then like you don't know what's going to happen in the later game. So these guys are going to be very popular options here. Just looking at the just basic breakdown that we have over here on Lineup HQ, guys. If you haven't signed up for Lineup HQ, Nito stuff we have. It's Nito. It's great. It's there. But we got Booker and Ayton, likely to be 2 of the chalkiest guys on the slate. Like it's a decent matchup considering half of OKC is just not playing today. And I entirely understand why, and I'm probably going to end up eating it. So we got Ayton here sitting at 8K, and we got Booker here sitting at 8.7K. Projected to be 40% plus owned on, I believe, both sites. Are these your main go-to guys? Are you just eating the chalk knowing that everyone else is going to eat the chalk too? Or are you kind of staying away from these guys and kind of taking some risks on the later game?
I think you have to eat the chalk a little bit. I think particularly DeAndre Ayton, it's not clear who's going to defend him on Oklahoma City because you've got Steven Adams and Nerlens Noel are both out. So yeah, who's defending Ayton? Like Mike Muscala? We don't even know. And then I think, I think Devin Booker is always a possibility to have a tremendous game. And yeah, with Phoenix still having something to play for, I think that's meaningful. I'd go further down the bench and looking at guys just because I do think they're going to be playing everyone kind of normal minutes. It's like Cameron Johnson's a guy that I would be considering even going down so far like Cameron Payne and Javon Carter. They've each had some pretty good games during this bubble season.
Yeah, what about any of these other ancillary
Ancillary
Like
pieces.
Rubio, Bridges, Kaminsky probably not going to get a ton of run.
Yeah, it's a difficult call. Probably not. I'm not as interested in Rubio and Mikal Bridges just because they haven't been doing as well lately, so I don't really know what's going on there. I just feel like Rubio is not a guy that's going to put up a huge game. I mean, it happens every once in a while, but he usually is needing some steals and stuff to get there. I mean, I think the main guys on Phoenix are the guys I talked about, just Eaton, Booker, Cameron Johnson. And then if I'm looking for a real punt play, maybe like some of the smaller guards, Javon Carter and Cameron Bain.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with you. Like Phoenix is pretty cut and dry. You're going to two main guys here, and you're probably playing some OKC guys over on the other side. So let's go ahead and get over to them. We got everyone out. Like we got Steven Adams is out. Gallinari is out. I'm sure, obviously still inactive. Noel out. SGA out. So two guys that are immediately popping off the page just because of their price. Baisley, only 3.3K. He's been taking a ton of shots the last two games. 27 total over the last two games, 37 points and 23 points. Not what you generally expect out of a 3.3K priced guy. Add on top of that all the usage on the team outside Chris Paul is just gone. He's going to play a boatload of minutes. He's going to get some usage. He's going to shoot. He's going to be heavily owned, and he's going to be probably worth it. Are you using Baisley? Are you going Muscala sitting there at 3.2K? Like, the builds are basically just making themselves starting off with these first two games, and these are the first two guys that just immediately jump off the page.
Right. So I like Baisley a lot. He's one of their younger players. I believe he's their first-round draft pick. I think he had gone to Australia or something, skipped college route. But I think he's a guy that they're really high on. I think he's a player they want to develop, and I think that's the kind of situation they're in, right? I mean, they're sitting their veteran players to try to develop some of the young guys, get those guys on the court. I think he's probably the main guy they're trying to develop. I'd definitely prioritize him over a guy like Terrence Ferguson, who's never really, a high point per minute player. He's more of a veteran. They kind of know what they have in him.
His name is Terrence Ferguson.
Yeah. So, and then, Chris Paul, I think it's a big question. How many minutes is he going to play? I mean, it's kind of a bad signal when they're resting all the other veterans on the team, and we haven't heard anything on him. So we presume.
Yeah, and he's the oldest veteran on the team, and he's still playing.
Right. So, I mean, we presume that if he was going to sit, we would have heard that already, right? Because I already said, we've got a bunch of guys sitting. These are the guys. Then we saw that situation with Milwaukee where they sat Brook Lopez at the start of the game, and then none of the other veterans played in the second half. So a little bit of volatility possible with Chris Paul tonight or today.
Yeah. What do you think about like those are the chalk guys? Like Chris Paul, I don't know if I'm taking the chance. Like I'd rather just take Booker, knowing that he's locked in for minutes, knowing that he's going to check. Like absolutely, Chris Paul can outscore him, but the price difference negligible, the ownership difference negligible. So I don't think it's really worth it for me to play Chris Paul. Like unless I'm like even bringing it back, like you want to generally have a correlation play where it's like both of these teams are going to like one's not going to sit if the other is doing well and the game's close. Like the stacking scenario in this is really a full-on correlation between the stars over on Phoenix and Chris Paul over on OKC, because there's a decent chance that they just don't even play Chris Paul in the second half. So I'd much rather take a chance on Booker or Ayton, knowing that Chris Paul might just be like, I'm done second half, or they might just play 5 minutes, not come out of the fourth quarter. Any number of things can happen. What about these other guys? Just a bunch of ugly names here, like for OKC, just Ferguson, Nader, Delio, like everyone is just not guys that you know.
Right. Yeah. And they're all kind of like similarly sized too and seem to have a similar skill set. Probably the two guys I like the best of the remaining are Hamidou Diallo and then Dort. Like he kind of had a big game a few games ago against Dort. And I honestly, I don't know a ton about his history, but I mean, he's been playing there with the starters. So he's probably one of the two guys, Diallo and Dort from the remaining guys that I'm interested in.
Yeah. I mean, they don't make like horrible. Everyone assumes that in NBA, like what we think is going to happen happens, but It doesn't always happen like that. Basley and Muscala, both of them should end up getting a bunch of minutes. Muscala could end up getting into some foul trouble. Any number of things have happened with him. I'm more apt to take a shot on Basley, knowing what he's been doing the last 2 games, knowing that he's going to shoot. He should have somewhere around 18 shot attempts in this game would be my guess. So throwing him in there, I think, is much more of a lock than going with Muscala, who like he can easily get into some trouble. He can easily get into foul trouble, and he can easily be gone, and they might not even care about who they're throwing on Ayton, and they can just do whatever they want. But yeah, like taking a guy or a shot on a guy like Dort, who is not projected to come in a lot of ownership, is going to have a lot of minutes, can end up putting up 15, 20 shot attempts. It's possible. It's well within the realm of possibility. I think I prefer Dort to Muscala in tournaments just because it just changes the way that your entire lineup is built. So I'm right there with you. Ready to move on to the next game where we have just as many questions?
Just one more comment. I mean, just talking these players over. I can't imagine who's going to defend Ayton in the center. I mean, the only big guy they have is Muscala, and I don't think of him as a particularly good defender. So,
yeah, I mean, he's the only big guy, but also you have to think on top of that, they don't care. So they might just throw anyone on him and let Ayton have his way. So if you're not playing Muscala, you're not expecting him to have a ton of minutes, then you pretty much need Ayton in on the other side. Like, it's that simple, unless Ayton's going to get in some random foul trouble. If Muscala is getting in foul trouble or if he's not getting a ton of work, then you need Ayton on the other side because you're assuming that they don't have anyone to guard him that well. But let's move on over to Dallas here. It's a 1 or 221 total here. Utah obviously favorite. We got news that Mitchell is not going to play here, so that's a little bit of news. For Dallas, we got news that no one is playing here. We have Brunson, Lee, Powell, Luka, DFS, Porzingis, all out. Curry may or may not play. Have we gotten official news on him yet?
I don't think anything official. I'm kind of presuming he's going to play. I think he's listed as probable.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm assuming too, but it's the bubble. Who knows what's going to go on? They have a few guards that they can end up throwing in there. But let's start with the Utah side before we get into the nightmare that is the Dallas starting lineup, just like the OKC starting lineup and players. Over on Dallas, without Mitchell in there, there's obviously going to be an increase in usage. Clarkson should eat up a bunch of usage without him in there. Like, which guys are you looking at over on the Utah side, if any? Like, I know that they're really not playing for a ton. Like, it's all seeding. Like, I don't want to get into narratives about what seeding matters, what seeding doesn't, who wants to win, and who really just doesn't care at all. But let's start off with Utah here. Are you planning on using many of these guys? I mean, Gobert is another decent option, but he's saying they're slightly cheaper than Ayton. I think I'd much rather have Ayton. Like, who knows if Gobert's going to end up playing the entire game. Again, not a ton to play for here. Who are you targeting on the Utah end?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the smaller guards that are probably going to benefit from Donovan Mitchell sitting. So Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson are the 2 guys that come immediately to mind. I kind of like Clarkson on both sides. I think he's attractively priced. And Mike Conley seems to be popping more for me a little bit more on DraftKings. So I kind of like Conley on DraftKings and Clarkson on FanDuel.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of on the same page here with you. But like, what about anyone? I'm page outside of Clarkson.
Outside of Clarkson?
That's it. He could be in for some extra minutes because all these other guys. Yeah, outside Clarkson, I got nothing.
Yeah, I think Conley and Clarkson, and those are really the 2 guys that I'm most interested in because I don't think Utah has a ton to play for. And I think Clarkson's probably the safest. I think Conley, maybe they're going to rest him a little bit just because he's kind of had an up and down year. So I'm probably going with Jordan Clarkson primarily from Utah. And I think I'm just concerned that anyone else is really susceptible to being sat down or there's just much better options on the slate on other teams.
Yeah, well, that's Utah. Now we get to the fun part. Boban, greatest player of all time, correct?
Yeah, it's hard to deny.
Yeah, you can't deny it.
I do think in another era, we might seriously be talking about him as one of the greatest NBA players of all time. But
I mean, let's be honest. If he was playing when Wilt was playing, with how good he is, if he could just make it up and down the court, Like he'd have 30 rebounds a game and 40 points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but we got Boban here as a potential great play. We got Wright here as a potential great play. Burke is going to be chalky. Always a chance that he ends up just not doing too much. We got Seth Curry if he ends up playing. Could be chucking quite a bit, underpriced. Hardaway, clearly underpriced and probably going to be chucking a whole lot. We got Justin Jackson sitting there, low ownership. Who knows how much he's going to get in the game. JJ Barea, old guy. Don't know how much he's going to play, but when he's in the game, I think this current points per minute with these guys off the floor is like 1.23. So he gets 20, 25 minutes. Could be a potential great value play, great pivot off of Burke. Like, sort through these things. Like, who's your top play and who's your fade?
So I think you got to decide between Seth Curry and Trey Burke, and you got to see what the starting lineup is. It's even hard to imagine, with both Luka and Porzingis out, what the starting lineup is going to be. But I think they're probably going to be going with one of Curry and Burke. So I might prioritize whichever one is starting. If they're both starting, probably go with Trey Burke just because I feel like he's a little bit more of a gunner. Probably see he's lower priced, I believe, at least on DraftKings. He's lower. Burke's lower priced on DraftKings. Curry's 100 cheaper on FanDuel. I still kind of prefer Trey Burke. So I'd say he's probably my number one priority, but we really got to see the starting lineup. I kind of like Maxi Kleber a lot if Boban's not starting, or if Boban and Kleber are starting together.
Yeah, so we run Plate IQ here. Not Plate IQ, Court IQ. Gosh, baseball and basketball at the same time. Fun times. And the biggest boosts are Kleber, Barea, Hardaway, and then other guys that are on the court, like obviously changes. We've had a few scenarios where both Luka and Porzingis have been out at the same time, but this is just a whole different one. But Kleber, Barea, Hardaway, the three biggest beneficiaries by a decent amount. And then we also have to think about the minutes and also Burke being on. Like, everything's kind of different, but we see that all these guys are going to get an extra boost in usage. All these guys are way, way too cheap here. Like, honestly, I'm starting to lean a whole bunch of different ways at pretty much the same time here. But I have trouble seeing, like, if I'm not using Burke, you have to use Barea. Like, let's talk about if you fade, who do you play? Like, if you're not using Burke, you go in Steph Curry or Seth Curry or Barea pretty much automatically.
Yeah, maybe even I don't know how much I like Barea just because it's hard to see him like going out and playing like 36 minutes or something. Just because the veteran status kind of bothers me. Probably. Yeah, I think DeLon Wright is in play. So, like, let's say I'm fading Burke, then yeah, probably Seth Curry or DeLon Wright.
Would you use both of them? If you're fading Burke, would you use both Wright and Curry in the same lineup?
So I think it's possible. I think anything's in play. It's going to be a wild day. So yeah, I would do that, but I would maybe limit my total number of Mavericks, just because you've seen these situations, right, where a team's decimated by injury, they're playing as kind of a superior opponent. And everyone's like, oh, wow, the value is so wild. Like, you got to have, 3 guys, 4 guys from this team. And yeah, I think a lot of your builds are going to be showing like 3, 4 Mavs. Like, they could go out and score like 65 points. I mean, all of their top scorers are sitting, like a huge chunk of their usage. Like, what if they just got wiped off the court? I mean, Utah is a good defensive team. So yeah, I mean, I think you can play kind of any combination of Mavs, but I'd maybe just try to limit it, at least in a good portion of my lineups.
Yeah. No, I mean, yes, well, Utah isn't as great defensively as they used to be, but it's still like a spot where I'm just kind of trying to wonder, like, in the case of a blowout, who is still going to be on the court regardless. And I could see Hardaway not really being on the court. Like, Boban, I don't know if they'll end up – there's always a chance that Boban ends up going for huge minutes. Like, we never know. It's almost impossible to predict, but it's all over the place here. Anything can happen, but, I mean, just mix up. Like, be cognizant of who you're playing and who you're pairing with who you're playing. Like,
Yeah.
again, Trey Burke, if you're eating that chalk, then probably don't want to pair him with JJ Barea or even maybe DeLon Wright, because they're going to have negative correlations here. Go check out Slate IQ, but like, this is not a scenario we've run into before. But just be cognizant of who else from Dallas you have in your team, just like over on OKC. Be cognizant of who else you have on your team when you're playing this. Is there anything, like any correlations between Dallas and Utah? Like, if you're playing these Dallas players, you want to be playing these guys over on the other side.
It's tough to say because like Donovan Mitchell's out. I mean, I'd probably maybe try to pair the guards, right? Because I think it'd be a little bit more of a guard-oriented game. So yeah, maybe I am trying to pair. If I'm using like DeLon Wright or Trey Burke, maybe trying to pair him with Jordan Clarkson or Mike Conley. And I think that's going to kind of happen naturally with the builds anyway, just because I think those are the highest kind of projected point per dollar guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Dallas. We can move on. I think we might get some news on Dallas before the game, since it's starting in an hour and a half or so, 2 hours, hour and a half. I don't know. Time is irrelevant to me. Let's move on to Toronto. Going up against Milwaukee. Interesting play. 3.1K. I understand the game theory behind it. Sell me on him.
Yeah, so he's a high point per minute player. He's a young player. He's the kind of guy they want to develop. So Gasol's out. So I think everyone's going to be thinking Serge Ibaka. And I think Ibaka's a fine play. But I think you'll have seen this situation a few times during, prior to the restart. And, sometimes it'd be like, Ibaka. Sometimes it'd be Rondé Hollis Jefferson. But like Chris Boucher probably has the highest upside out of any of them. And he's a guy that can, he can go in, get some rebounds, get a ton of blocked shots, long arms, can get steals, and then he can also go out to the 3-point line. That's a place where Milwaukee's a little bit vulnerable. So yeah, I mean, I think you've got to be looking towards the younger players in all the situations here, because those are the guys that the teams want to develop. They're the guys the team wants to see on the court at the end of the season. So yeah, I think he's a very high upside, low ownership play.
Yeah, have we gotten Gasol news, or is it just kind of assumed?
It's a good question. So, yeah, I mean, I think neither team has anything to play for. So yeah, they're listed out Monday.
I think that was 4 months ago.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think that it's kind of confusing because most of this news is from March here. So I think Gasol might actually be in.
Okay. So if he's in, then that changes things. But I don't know. I think this is where you start to get into the starting lineups. I'm going to be shocked if Toronto isn't resting multiple veterans. Maybe not shocked, but I'd be very surprised if Toronto is not resting guys.
Yeah, and that's the big thing with this. We have 2 games that are on before we'll probably get any news. Like, you're kind of just making guesses. Like, we don't know if someone's going to be sitting for Milwaukee. We're not going to know if someone is going to be sitting for Toronto. We don't know how many guys are going to play that much. Like, nothing really matters in this game at all. They don't want to get anyone injured. Know that Toronto is probably going to end up playing most of their guys a significant amount of minutes once the playoffs end up starting. I'm trying to figure out who I want to play on Toronto, and I'm fairly certain that the answer is no one.
Yeah.
I have zero interest in anyone.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it might be a good game to just wait and see if value opens up. And if you get that value in time to maybe swap off of some of the Dallas chalk, I think that's an option. I do think there's kind of a risky play where you avoid some of the Dallas chalk and put in some bench players from teams that haven't announced their resting guys and just try to make the best of it. But I mean, that's kind of a very risky contrarian GPP play where you're basically presuming value is going to open up later in the day that we just don't know about. And if it doesn't, then you'll try to fill it the best you can, where you can, whatever starters you can put in there. But yeah, I mean, it's fair to just totally fade Toronto, at least at the start of the slate.
Yeah, guys. Sorry if my internet's having some issues. I don't know what's going on in Denver, but even my phone is having issues with internet, not even on Wi-Fi. So sorry about that. But let's move on over to the Milwaukee side. Again, like as it stands right now, I have no interest in anyone. Like news might come out, like if Giannis isn't playing and they expect Middleton Bledsoe to get some minutes, or you can go DiVincenzo, like George Hill might get some minutes. Brolo might not play. Like any number of things can happen. We're not going to get that news before lock in all reality. And so being able to swap some stuff around as of right now, like anyone interest you on Milwaukee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting Giannis in a lot of my builds, and I might start the day with it at least, and just see what happens. Because I do think nothing's been announced so far in terms of them resting their starters. So yeah, I'm kind of leaning the Milwaukee starters just more than a little bit more than the Toronto guys. Milwaukee's favored in the game, I think by 7. So you're probably leaning more the Milwaukee veterans. And then if we get news, you just have to kind of swap out of it. I mean, I can see like a situation where you're starting the day with Giannis, just kind of hoping for the best, and then if you get news that he's resting, then you're trying to swap down to LeBron, or on Draftkings, maybe you're trying to swap down to Anthony Davis. But there is a point where if there's enough guys resting by the end of the day, you're just leaving a ton of salary on the table. But maybe that's what you have to do if these veterans in the later games really do get are sitting, then yeah, you might have to leave a bunch of salary on the table.
Yeah. Honestly, today is absolutely a day where you can leave salary on the table, and it could end up working fantastically. Like this is just one of those slates I would keep wanting to say this time of year, but right before the playoffs where teams don't really have anything to play for. It's just kind of the scenario that we're in, and this is unique because of the bubble scenario. But let's move on to Indy, Miami. Who are you looking at over on the Heat side? Like we obviously have Butler going to be uber chalky, 7.2K, little bit too cheap. Are you eating it, or are you just letting it go?
Yeah, I'm gonna have some Jimmy Butler. It's that revenge game, right? Like so, Butler and TJ Warren almost killed each other earlier in the season.
I mean, let's be honest. Butler has a lot of problems with a lot of people in the NBA.
That's true, but I mean, this one seemed different, right? Like, this one seemed personal. I mean, they're all personal, but like Butler and TJ Warren really seemed like they didn't like each other, and yeah, I think I'm going to have some Jimmy Butler and some Bam Adebayo. None is sitting, so I think Goran Dragic, assuming he's in the starting lineup, is a play as well. But yeah, I mean, it should be interesting. This game should be interesting. I think TJ Warren is maybe iffy to play. I think Butler is officially iffy to play as well, but expected to play. I think TJ Warren's a little bit more questionable. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Warren, doesn't start. I mean, if he sits this game, I don't know. I'm a little bit surprised that Jimmy Butler is presumed to be in, just because Miami seems to have a lot to risk. Like, what if they brawl again and Jimmy Butler gets suspended? I don't know. Like, if I'm a Miami coach, I'm not sure if I'm leaving Butler on the court that long. Having said that, I do think he's a good tournament play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know with 50% ownership, but we don't have enough options. So I think he has to be in playing tournaments. I think I have to use at least a little bit of him. I don't know if I'll be with the field or below it, but probably going to be below the field on it. What about anyone else on this team? Like Robinson could be in for a decent amount of minutes, and maybe he's chucking here, going to come in at low ownership, not horribly expensive. Could be a decent pivot off of some of the chalkier guys on the bot or of the first 2 games on the low end pricing. Like Hero, with everyone playing, like I don't know if it's the greatest idea in the world. Like, I don't know, Olynyk maybe, guy that could potentially be in for some minutes as he always is, and if he's shooting, then he can just crank out the fantasy points on a point per minute basis. Any of these other guys on Miami that not going to come in at heavy ownership, a little bit more volatile on how many minutes they're going to play and how much fantasy points they're going to end up with, but again, we're getting very close to the playoffs. Like, also, we should probably go over it. Like, Heat and Pacers really aren't playing for too much. I mean, the main thing has got to be like getting the 4th and 5th seed. The 76ers are 1 game behind, and I'm sure the Heat and the Pacers would much, much rather play each other than they would play the Celtics, the Raptors, the Bucks. So there is a little bit to the seeding in this game where I have to assume that they want to win, right?
Yeah, I think so. Just in terms of the other guys on Miami, I'm a little bit worried that they're going to come in a little bit higher owned than we would expect, just because Butler's missed some time. So, like the guys like Tyler Hero have just gone absolutely berserk. Like Kelly Olynyk's gone absolutely berserk, and I'm a little bit worried that maybe the field's caught up to them, but this isn't as good of a situation for them. So I'm probably, if I am going like trying to go contrarian on a Miami guy, it's probably either Dragic or Duncan Robinson, just because like Tyler Hero has been going so berserk. I don't know if he can keep that up.
Yeah, well, I didn't think TJ Warren could keep things up, and then it's the bubble. It's the bubble. Anything can happen. Let's move on to the indie side of thing. We got like I just don't have a huge interest in playing many guys. Like Warren is sitting here just obviously destroying every single night, but who knows if he's going to end up playing. Like, I guess it's not the worst idea in the world to leave a decent amount of money on the board or have a 2v2 swap just in case we get information out on anything, because like swapping from Butler to Warren, getting less ownership if you've got some ground to make up. I know he's more expensive, but you're probably going to end up leaving money on the board, or even swapping down from like LeBron or Davis down to him and then doing a 2v2 swap. Like, who are the guys that you need to keep in mind over on this indie team based on any news that we could possibly end up getting prior to lock?
So, I mean, I kind of like Victor Oladipo because we're presuming Jimmy Butler to play. So, like, I'm kind of seeing them matching Oladipo up on Butler, especially, and I think he becomes especially attractive if TJ Warren's sitting, or even if he's starting, but the coach is just kind of keeping him off the court a little bit longer because of the history. And Oladipo is still much cheaper than he should be, and he's starting to see kind of normal minutes. Right, he's been playing 32, 27, 31, 35. Like, those are good normal minutes for Oladipo. And we're starting to see the production come up a little bit more. I think he's 5,800 on both sites. Like, that's a good price.
Yeah, no, right there with you. And like, obviously how he was going kind of before quarantine started, like getting him some minutes is probably not the worst idea in the world now that he seems to be back to full health here. What about any of the other guys here on this team? Miles Turner, any interest in him? I mean, center's an interesting position today. We got Ayton and Boban shock. So swapping over to Turner, 6.3K, kind of gives you a different lineup build. Could go for a big game. I know he hasn't been doing great pretty much this entire time, but like just going from an Ayton and Butler to a Turner Warren build, going to get you a ton less ownership, and they could potentially outscore him.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting contrarian play. It's going to be tough to get away from DeAndre Ayton. I'm probably going to end up having way too much DeAndre Ayton, and he's just going to have a total dud.
Isn't that always how it goes?
Yeah, right. Like, as soon as I'm like, no, I just can't get off this player, it's like I'm cursing him. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like Maxi Kleber too at center on Draftkings. So then that's taking away some of the Miles Turner interest.
Yeah. Anyone else here? Holiday, Jay Crowder. Like, I'm just not seeing anyone else I really want to end up playing here. Brogdon, any interest in him?
Maybe some mild interest in Brogdon, just because he's been doing well lately. His minutes have been regular, right? Like, he missed some time, but since I think it was like a neck injury. But like, since coming back from that, he's actually been playing regular minutes. So yeah, I could probably Brogdon and Oladipo are the two guys I'm most interested in, just because I feel like they're a little bit underpriced because of the injury situations coming into the bubble, and they're starting to really see the minutes and production there.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of right there with you. And FYI, guys, we're going through this a little bit quicker so that we can get to questions, because There's probably going to be some, and I'm not going to be surprised if we get some news towards the end of the show. So I want to make sure we have time for that. So let's move on to the last game of the night, Denver versus Lakers. By the way, guys, if you're in a state where sports betting is legal and you have access to Draftkings, hop on there. They're doing a great promo. If you bet $1 on this game, I think almost any different thing, and like depending on how many people place a bet for this game, then you get a free bet. I think it's at $45 right now. It can go all the way up to a $100 free bet. So that's literally just free money for placing $1. If you haven't signed up for it yet, go through the RG links. But get on there if you have sports betting legal in your state. Now's the perfect time. But we got Denver versus the Lakers here. Lakers 5-point favorite. I actually kind of like the Denver side of it. But I think, are Davis and LeBron both probable or questionables? I can't remember.
I think they're probable.
That's vaguely what I remember.
They're probable. It's a little bit difficult because it logically doesn't make a ton of sense, right? And so even if they do play, geez, man, I'm just concerned they're not going to see full minutes. I mean, that's the story of this slate, right? We're down to the last few games of the NBA season, so no one is totally safe. But yeah, I think they're both probable. I would just stay tuned, stay checking the updates on your phone. Turn your alerts on. Make sure you are going to get a notification if LeBron and Anthony Davis are sitting in it and you've got them in your lineups. If they get scratched a half hour before game time.
My best suggestion is have either LeBron or Davis in your utility spot or in your forward spot so that you can swap from one over to the other if need be. I don't know if they'd set both of them, but yeah, one definitely could be sitting. So keep them in a spot where you're able to swap onto the other guy over on DK at least. And if you have Davis in your lineup, make sure that you have an extra $300 in salary, or else you could be in a whole lot of trouble here. But assuming that they're going to play, do you have a preference one over the other? Are you going to be playing either really?
Probably go for LeBron, at least on FanDuel. I mean, it's hard to fill that small forward spot. So yeah, I mean, LeBron is probably the guy I'm more interested in, particularly on FanDuel. I mean, you've got a small forward on FanDuel. You've got Giannis at 11,000 and LeBron at 9,600. That's a really good price for LeBron. There's just the concern is he's in the last game of the night, and what if you do get some news, or what if he's only playing 3 quarters max? So yeah, probably a little bit more interested in LeBron. Unfortunately, he's the more expensive one. Although I guess on DraftKings, maybe it makes sense to kind of go with LeBron, and that way it's pretty easy to swap down to Anthony Davis if LeBron's out and Davis is playing.
Yeah. Also, on top of that, if you can, the Indy Miami game, it's an hour before lock, so don't have just LeBron or just Davis for the last 2 games. Have them and then at least one other probably cheap player, because you can always swap from LeBron or Davis and some other guy that's cheap for Butler and Warren, or Bam and Butler, or something like that. You can do something in that scenario and swap off to another pairing with that has some upside, but also isn't going to absolutely crush you in terms of leaving $5,000 on the board of salary. So there's a few different ways that you can end up doing it. Just be cognizant of who you have in the last 2 games, because you can always swap them around real easily. And also, I think Giannis is an easy swap onto James or Davis if you have him in the lineup. Might not have news by then, but about the Lakers game, but you can always just swap over there and hope for the best. What about anyone else here? The possibility of James or Davis sitting. We have Kuzma sitting here, been playing decent the last 2 games, putting up a lot of shot. Guy has a little bit of upside considering his 5.2K price tag. Do you feel like taking a shot on him just in case one of these guys end up getting ruled out, or off the possibility if neither of them do, he can still come into the game and put up a few shots?
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I think Kuzma is a great tournament option that I hadn't really been considering. But yeah, I do think there's a good chance that the guy that most likely to benefit if the Lakers aren't going full throttle is probably Kyle Kuzma, because he's probably a guy who, just because of the situation with the free agent, with free agency last summer, he's a guy that was probably expecting to step into a little bit of a bigger role and then didn't because of Anthony Davis coming over. So yeah, maybe he's a guy that if they're sitting Davis or LeBron, they're going to give him a little bit more usage. So yeah, and he's really well priced. So yeah, Kyle Kuzma is a guy I'll have some interest in.
And what about anyone else? I know there's a lot of cheap guys on this slate, so you probably don't want to look into any of these guys. But Cook, Caruso, Danny Green, JaVale McGee, Waiters, Howard, like any of these guys tickle your pickle, or are you just done with them?
Yeah, I mean, like Dion Waiters was a guy I had some interest in coming into the bubble, but he's now no longer minimum priced, and with a slate where there is going to be so much value, it's tough to get interested in him. It's probably Anthony Davis, LeBron, or Kuzma for me, or if I end up with any of the other guys, it's probably going to be an emergency situation where there were some guys sitting I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the other side with Denver here. Don't really have a whole lot of news with Denver. Like, Barnes obviously not playing, but they really don't have a ton to play for. They're currently sitting at third in the standings. Like, there's not a huge difference between third, second, fourth. Like, people don't want to play the Rockets. People looking like they don't really want to play the Thunder. You don't want to play the Mavericks in the first round. Honestly, don't know if you want to play the Blazers if they get into the first round. They're looking pretty good. So seeding's not really a thing, especially considering they can't drop down to the fifth seed, but home field advantage doesn't even matter because it's in the bubble. Like, don't have a ton to play for. Murray came in the other night, like first game back in a little bit, and he played 39 minutes versus Utah. Had a day of rest, like put the ball up 25 times, just weird bubble stuff. Like Porter, they're probably trying to get him some more minutes so he's ready come playoff time. Played 45 the other night, though, so they don't want him to be exhausted. He's averaging close to 40 in the last 4 games. Actually, he's averaging almost exactly 40 over the last 4 games, putting up monster numbers. Priced at 7.7K. May seem like a ton, but when he's coming in at 4.8% ownership compared to Butler, who's at like 50, or Booker, who's going to be at 50, like, can we play Porter instead of Butler or Booker and just hope that they're going to continue to play him all these minutes and let him just roll out the production that he has been recently? Like, are you in with that line of thinking?
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's weird to be talking about Michael Porter Jr. at this kind of insanely elevated price tag and be like, oh, he's in consideration. I mean, he's been going absolutely crazy. And I mean, he fits that mold of a young player that a team wants to see more from. He's probably not going to be playing these huge minutes in the playoffs, but he's probably going to be playing significant minutes, right? Considering it's the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that even at at 8,000, 7,700, there's some presumably safe production there. So yeah, I mean, he's a guy I'll have some interest in. He's probably the guy I'm most interested in on Denver, even at his elevated price tag. And yeah, like you said, Jamal Murray is maybe another guy who I have some interest in. As kind of a tournament option, just because he kind of so unexpectedly came in and had a huge game in his first game in Orlando, and they didn't seem to be limiting his minutes at all. So maybe he's someone I'm interested in just because he can have a big game with low ownership.
Yeah. Trying to think anyone else here, like any interest in Joker. Like center has 2 super chalk spots. Joker's still going to draw a bit of ownership here, but I don't know how much they have to play for. Don't know exactly what he's going to do, but he did play 40 minutes the other night versus Utah. Like, any interest in him as a potential pivot? Like, I guess one thing you can end up doing if you have Davis in your lineup, maybe don't have Joker in there, and it's a $800 difference, so you can swap down to him if you don't have Davis in the forward spot and you don't have the $300 to get up to LeBron. Like, not the worst idea in the world. Any interest in Joker?
Yeah, and probably more on DraftKings because the positional swaps are a little bit easier there. Like as you just kind of illustrated, but like on FanDuel, I'm not entirely sure what you do at center if if you're going with Jokic and he ends up sitting, or or then it comes out he's going to be playing just limited minutes or something. You're kind of in a much tougher situation on FanDuel with him only being center eligible than on DraftKings.
Yeah. What about last guy, Jeremy Grant? And then we'll get to questions. Just because dude's got a great last name.
Right. So yeah, I do think he's in consideration because he's been doing really well, and Millsap's not playing, or I guess, yeah, I don't know. I guess if Millsap's out, then I'm interested in Jeremy Grant. Otherwise, probably not. Do we know if Millsap's playing?
I mean, as of right now, it looks like he's playing, but
okay, yeah. So
do we know if anyone's playing?
Right. So yeah, so that limits my interest in Jeremy Grant.
All right. Well, let's pop on over to some questions here. Let's see. I'm trying to find exactly where the questions started. Best plays from OKC tonight. I think it's very, very clear on my end that it is Basley, Muscala, and Chris Paul.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going a little different because I think I like Diallo and Dort. I mean, I definitely like Basley. Chris Paul is just a question of, is he really going to be playing the entire game? I mean, otherwise, if Chris Paul is playing the entire game, if he's starting and playing his regular minutes, then I think he's a great play. If we get any word from the coach beforehand, the press conference or whatever, that he's going to be limited, then, probably have to pivot off of.
Yeah, DK Cash playing Basley at center, pair him with Muscala or Boban. I think Muscala is probably safer for Cash. Actually, he's definitely safer for Cash. You kind of on the same page?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I don't think we have the starting lineup yet, so we kind of have to see who's in there. I mean, I like Ayton. Like, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I can't get Ayton onto the team. Like using up a center and utility spot on centers.
Yeah, Delia or Oladipo, 6K, so can easily afford both. If you can afford Delia or Oladipo, then you go with him instead.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I don't know that Diallo's such a huge usage guy where he's going to come in and put up Oladipo numbers.
Yeah, someone's asking who all playing for something. It's pretty much absolutely Phoenix is playing for something. You can make the argument that Indy and Miami are playing for something. But that's really, like, no one else is really playing for too much. Everyone else is kind of locked in. Like, do we think the Jazz are trying to get into that fifth spot? Like, would they rather go against Houston than the Nuggets? I don't know. Like, the only ones that I feel like actually have some seeding that they want to do something about would be the Heat and the Pacers. So they're probably playing for that because without Simmons, like, they're fine with playing Philadelphia or Indy in the first round, much rather than going up against the Celtics, Raptors, or Bucks, who are clearly the three best teams in the East. You kind of on that page?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's Phoenix really stands out as they're fighting for a playoff spot, right? So they're looking to continue their season. So that's the team by far that is going to be playing their starters regular minutes and really just trying to win the game. And then, I mean, I'm always just trying to think of what players are playing to kind of establish themselves in the NBA. So they, like a lot of the guys on the Thunder, then like a lot of guys on Oklahoma City. And then, we're just going to have to kind of see as the day goes on with Toronto, Milwaukee, the Lakers, some of these teams that they really have nothing to play for. If they're putting their younger players in, like those are guys I'm going to look strongly at pivoting to.
Yeah. Outlook on Dragic today?
I like him just because I think there's a good chance he's going to be starting because Kendrick Nunn's out. So, yeah, I kind of going into the day, I like Dragic.
Could Mike Conley go off today, or is Clarkson a better play? I'm personally more on Clarkson.
Yeah, I'm kind of more on Clarkson as well. Like these bench guys, like these kind of younger bench players that come in last week of the season and are starting to get starts, I always have my interest.
Yeah, but I think that pretty much does it for questions here, and it looks like we are out of time, guys. We got Meansy and Roth coming up on crunch time, guys. Get signed up for Sharpside. Forgot that we didn't say our Sharpside pick. Do you have one today, or are you not doing one today?
Yeah, I was thinking about Milwaukee -7, but it's a tough day, right? Because stuff's gonna evolve. I get the feeling that Toronto's not going to be going full throttle, so yeah, probably Milwaukee -7.
Yeah, I'm on Denver +5.5. Guys, get signed up for Sharpside. You just swipe left, you swipe right, you lock in bets, you get 5 in a row, you start making money for every single pick that you make. It's literally free. Just got to spend a few seconds picking your favorite team or favorite money line or favorite spread, anything. But go ahead and get signed up for it. It's free money. Literally free. Just takes very little time to do anything. But it's been fun, guys. Good luck on this ridiculous NBA slate. He's Squirrel Patrol. I'm Turd Ferguson. Hey, kids.